Well, welcome to another In Conversation, an interview session as part of the Innovation Entrepreneurship stream. It is a pleasure to welcome Ruth Afolabi onto here as we spend a bit of time with her and glean some insights and learnings and tap into Ruth's incredible experience that she has both in business but also entrepreneurship. And I'm joined today by my co-host in this session, the amazing Claire Durrant. Who's also run a session earlier on this week, but social media consultant and strategist, friend and colleague at Stronger. Claire, over to you.
Thanks so much, Matt. I'm really excited to be here today, and particularly to welcome Ruth to the conversation as well. Thanks for being here, Ruth.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I must admit I'm a bit of a fangirl of yours, Ruth. So if I get a bit overexcited, please do forgive me. I've been following kind of your journey, kind of for the last, maybe 2013, I think I kind of first stumbled across you. So for a while now, and I'm really excited to kind of ask you some questions and kind of get that opportunity today. Just to give you a little promo and a shout out. So you are the founder and CEO of a women's global media brand called Magnify, which is a fantastic publication which brings together faith and culture. But also on top of being a magazine, Magnify also has podcasts, events, and a range of different content mediums that kind of your community pulls together and comes together. Of over 30,000 women a week connect with your community online, which is fantastic. You've been featured on Huffington Post, BBC, Channel 4, Mary Claire, the Mail on Sunday, a whole raft of wonderful places. So we are really, really honoured to have you with us today. So you've got a whole host of amazing things going on, and I'm really looking forward to chatting through them today. But to kick us off, Ruth, welcome. Tell us a little bit where you're coming in from today.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I live in East London with my husband. We've been married for 2.5 years. And I think I'm finding the third lockdown a little bit more challenging. But as an introvert, I also have been grateful for some alone time over the last 10 months. So yeah, I'm based in London.
Amazing. And like you said, this lockdown does feel a little bit different to previous ones. Just, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing during lockdown as your alone times, maybe books or Netflix, or what do you do with your downtime?
So books, I'm definitely an Audible person. So most of last year was spent just reading a lot of books on marketing, on business, on finance, on building communities online. I'm currently reading 2 books, but one of them is Obama's book as well, which I find quite relaxing to get me through this time, given it's 24 hours. And yeah, Netflix as well. I love watching documentaries, so I think I've probably watched documentaries on absolutely everyone that I admire from all different streaming services. So yeah, that's been me over the last 10 months.
That's brilliant, Ruth. It's so great to hear the stuff that you're involved in. I'd love to give us a breakdown of maybe a typical week. Right now, where are you dividing up your time and your week?
Yes. So my weeks, one thing I try to do is really batch things into pieces. So say like with meetings, I very much try to have my meetings scheduled on Monday and Wednesdays. So I know those days I'm kind of just back to back, but that's as much as I can cope with. I can't do 5-day-a-week Zooms. It's not my thing at all. And obviously, as the Magpie team has grown and expanded on those 2 days, I'm kind of checking in with everyone and making sure that they're aware of like their weekly priorities and their monthly priorities. But what's amazing is I always say to the team that like, I want everyone to think as an entrepreneur. So it's not a team that you're going to come in where you're going to be micromanaged, but really like those meetings now, I'm having like the team lead their one-on-ones with me so that they really feel they're taking ownership of their area. We have team huddles once a week, which is an amazing time to check in and make sure everyone's on the same page. Then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I really try to use as like strategy days. So where I'm not on Slack. We've kind of disabled Slack this year because we realized that it was just taking too much time and just not efficient at all. So Tuesdays and Thursdays really spend time like thinking of strategy, and Friday kind of catching up and then preparing my emails, because one thing the team always joke about is on Monday you will get like 25 emails from me all at 8 a.m. But it's because I schedule everything on Friday and also use that as a review day. And then in my spare time at the weekends, I'm also building Brand House, which is a new business to help founders turn their side hustles into brands, and also helping organizations engage new niche audiences. So yeah, I don't like to use the word busy, but I am very full in my schedule, but I love all the things that I get to be involved in. And obviously seeing my husband, and then church via YouTube on Sundays.
That's ace, Ruth. And I'll ask one question about, as we head into this sort of next section on Magnify, and thinking about a bit about that, and then I'll hand over to Claire, but just thinking about how you launched Magnify, this magazine for women of faith. Tell us a bit about the vision and journey that you went on to bring that to life, because I know there'll be others who are sitting on dreams and visions right now, and maybe in that same process. I'd love to hear from you on that journey you've been on.
Amazing. Yeah. So Magnify started in 2009. So when I was 19 at Durham University. And the vision, I'd grown up in a Christian family, had an amazing childhood, always in youth group, always in church. But sadly, between 2005 and 2007, I lost 3 people in my family. And that completely rocked my view of God, of faith, of church. So went to Durham, and first term was kind of just all over the shop, not interested at all in Christianity at all. But then came back in the first term holidays and realized that a light had just switched on in my head, and that a true faith couldn't be dependent on whether things always went well, because that just wasn't the reality of life. And it was just amazing to see like my parents, who'd always been strong Christians, to actually know Christ for myself and not kind of have a surrogate faith. So came back to Durham, and just, I'm very much an all or nothing person. So immediately was like, everybody needs to know how amazing it is to be a Christian. And so the vision has always been, one, to share the gospel in an engaging and relevant way, but secondly, to build a community and inspire people that in their spheres of influence, they can make a difference. So initially started off as an event. So we had 3 women from different walks of life, different churches, sharing their faith. And we had about 70 people who weren't Christian out of the 100 who came, which was amazing, and just kind of showed me from the beginning that there was a need to do evangelism in a slightly different way to a demographic that I felt was very underserved. And a lot of my recollection of seeing Christianity presented was always like, you know, if you're lonely, if you're broken, if you have absolutely nothing going on, like, come to Christ, which is obviously true as well. But a lot of people that I knew, they then saw that as like a crutch, rather than in their own kind of strength, they felt like they were fine. And it's only when they would come to kind of a crossroad of like dealing with grief or loss that they would then turn. But I was like, actually, I would love to share the gospel with you before you reach that point. So started, just as an event. And then we had a big conference in London in 2009 in September, 6 months later. And that was amazing to see, like, the traction, having women from all different faiths and all across the country hearing about the gospel for the first time, but realized obviously we were not a church, and that was not at all part of the vision. And so that's when the idea of using media came in, because people could read blogs in their own time. So then we transitioned into a blog, and then a few years later, the print magazine. And here we are today, doing a whole range of different media things to try to get the word out.
It's brilliant. Thanks, Ruth.
Amazing. I mean, you've obviously, like, I liked what you said about you didn't like to say that you were busy, but you were full, and you enjoyed all of those different things that you do. I think that's really important, that we all kind of flourish in what we do, even though times feel busy at the moment. In the online space, which, you know, you've built a lot of your community, obviously you started off in person, but now it's kind of all online, and it's kind of might feel like a crowded space at the moment, online events, online blogs, and everything like that. Can you give maybe a little bit of advice about how you kind of cut through that noise, or how as a brand you at Magnify work to stand out?
So I think one of the key things I'm always talking about is we really spend time getting to know our target audience. So I know in the beginning, and particularly sometimes in Christian circles, there is a resistance to defining a target audience because it feels very exclusive. But I always think if you try to speak to everyone, you won't speak to anyone. So I think as we've grown, we've been very intentional on, as much as I would love every single woman in the world to engage with Magnify. There is probably a certain type of woman that gravitates naturally to the type of thing that we do and the type of people that we interview and the way that we do that. So in terms of the online space, we've been really clear about who we're trying to reach. And then we're constantly testing things to make sure that things are working and adjusting based on our target audience. But I think the key thing that saw us grow online literally by about 18,000 last year, particularly on Instagram, was making sure that we're adding value to our audience at every interaction. And I think for any brand, not just faith-based, there can be the desire just to kind of be pushing your products or like your new events. But actually, particularly in the midst of a pandemic where people were losing jobs, they were losing family members, they don't want to hear about your product every 5 minutes. So we've really focused in the online space on making sure that every single piece of content we're delivering value, but also across the different platforms that we have, making sure that every single thing has a different purpose. So, you know, with our podcast, when we started, we were doing all kinds of different interviews. And then we realized that actually work and faith was kind of a great focus point for that specific platform. So I think, yeah, we're always very intentional with using platforms, but constantly testing. And I think being online, data is going to be your best friend.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So do you use each platform and in a very intentional way, in a different way, or do you try and kind of use them all to speak the same type of messaging?
Well, obviously, we have an overall vision that's going to be consistent across every platform. But we know that certain platforms work differently for different things. So to give an example, obviously, there are podcasts that work. And in the future, when we have more than one podcast, but we realized that sometimes the podcast topics were very, very heavy. And the way that people engage with a podcast is normally they'll see the title and think, should I click through to listen to that? So say in the magazine, we had an amazing story of a couple, and the guy had got diagnosed with cancer a month before their wedding, and they were told it was terminal, but thank God he's healed and he's fine. This is 6 years later. But that was an interview that was brilliant in the print magazine because it's long form, people have time to digest it, and then kind of not knowing what to expect. So it's in the mix of a whole different range of stories. Whereas when we tried a similar story on the podcast, from looking at the analytics, and we did it a few times, different stories of kind of grief or loss or overcoming, that when people are busy and maybe they're on their lunch break or they're going for a run, unless they specifically have gone through that circumstance, they're probably not thinking, oh, I want to listen to a story like this in the middle of a global pandemic when I've also lost my job. But actually in the middle of a magazine, they'd probably be happy to read that type of story. And obviously our overall vision is still always to show you how through faith you can thrive through the challenges and also through the highs of life. But different platforms, I think when you understand your audience and their habits, work better for different things.
That's awesome. I love how you spoke a lot about data and understanding the data and not being afraid that just because it didn't work on one medium doesn't mean you should stop doing it completely, that you can just pivot and look at how your audience reacts to it in different places. It's really insightful. Thank you. And talking about kind of how you show up online, you as a person, as Ruth, have a very strong personal brand. I'd love to kind of unpack how you went about defining that personal brand alongside Magnify's brand, and how are they the same thing? Are they separate, and how you navigate that?
So I think for me, I use my Instagram in a very intentional way. So clearly, like, Magnify has a strong creative and a strong luxury fashion element that clearly as a founder translates into my Instagram as well, because it would be weird to kind of have, you know, a luxury fashion magazine and then be showing up in my pajamas on my Instagram. It doesn't really, for me anyway, make particular sense. So I always say that you should be authentic to who you are as a person. So genuinely, I have some friends who've got huge personal brands, and their Instagrams, they really do literally show up with like sleep in their eye and like brushing their teeth, and they really want to show you the real them. And that works really well for who they are, because naturally, if you know them, that's how they act as people. Whereas for me as a person, that isn't authentic to me. So I think, one, it's really important to be authentic to who you actually are and not try to conform to what you think someone in your position should be doing. I think another thing is, in the early years, my Instagram was essentially just a reflection of Magnify. Every single thing was about Magnify. But when I think about founders that I follow, I don't follow their personal Instagrams just to hear about their brand, because obviously I can just be directed to their brand page. But often it's like the behind the scenes, or what it takes to actually build that vision, or the other aspects of this person's life, because all of us are multifaceted. So I've been very intentional in talking about the things that are important to me, and essentially showing the expression of what it means to be a Magnify woman, which is a woman with faith at the core and the center of who she is, but also passionate about a range of different areas and wanting to thrive and be purposeful in everything that I do. So yeah, I've been very intentional, particularly over the last 2 years, in building my personal brand as well.
Incredible.
So good. A good question, more technically, just thinking about Magnify being it's a print magazine, but you also have a lot online. You've got a rich online offering. Just I wonder whether you could tell us a bit about the content you create and why it's important to have an online offering.
I think the way I see the magazine is definitely is like the cherry on top for either your really loyal community. So we'll get people who will buy 50 copies for their friends and family of each edition. That's probably not going to be a huge percentage of your print audience who will go through. And especially if you look at things like Instagram, I think unless you're like a fashion or beauty brand where people immediately need it, or you're selling candles or whatever, I think conversions of sales on Instagram is more about awareness and reach. So for us, it's making sure that we're top of mind with our audience. So say on Instagram, we'll do like daily devotionals that are probably about 50 words long. So every day the first thing you're seeing on stories is Magnify. On your feed, you'll see Magnify a couple of times a day, as opposed to a print magazine that's biannual. So we're very intentional in making sure that we build a relationship with our community where they actually remember us, because we all know we're all consumers of different things. If something only shows up twice a year, you're unlikely to remember it that significantly. So we've been very intentional online in making sure we're building a relationship with our audience, but also making sure that we are understanding how technology is progressing. So this year we're going to be rolling out a few more things to do with voice and video, because obviously they say by next year 82% of all online traffic will be directed at video. So obviously the print magazine is an amazing thing, but we are very much aware as a team that we have to be in tune with technology, otherwise it's impossible to reach your audience and actually get the message out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, you have built, from what I can see, such a thriving community, and I just love us to know, maybe are there some principles that you've applied to enable you to do that? I mean, how have you done that, and what's the impact of that community been on your business?
So yeah, we're very intentional in building community. I think some of the things we've learned are, one, to be consistent. So previously, before 2020, we'd have years where we didn't really have capacity. I was kind of the only one doing Instagram. So kind of for 3 months, we'd be like posting every day, then disappear for 6 months. And clearly, if you think about relationships that you have with friends, obviously we're a bit older now, so maybe think back to in school when you would probably speak to people every day. We didn't have anything else to do. People who are top of mind and actually encouraging you every day, that helps you to feel like these people are invested in me, and therefore as an audience or community member, I should spend my time or my money investing with them. Adding value has been a key thing, and then I guess continually surprising our audience. So a lot of what we've been looking at is CRM and making sure that you are tracking your community and their interactions with you so that you can better serve them. So community is at the heart of what we do, but we have also realized that, one, expanding the team's capacity. So now we have a community lead, because previously when I would host events, I clearly don't have the capacity to stay in touch with 300 people who've attended events throughout the year. But now actually having a dedicated community lead who is focusing on building really core community groups that are going to be really important for us moving forward. And those are full of people that we know also influence within their sphere. So yeah, I think the principle of multiplication with community has been very important. And the impact of building community on Magnify, I think, as much as social media is great and speaking at events when we were able to do that was important. There's nothing like word of mouth. So when you see women that actually say Magnify has impacted me in such a huge way, like whether it's been with my faith and coming to faith, or seeing my friend, I bought a magazine for a friend who then came to faith, or I attended an event and it helps me launch a business, or I read a story and I went through a really tough time with grief and that helps me get through. The impact of adding value to our community means that they genuinely become your ambassadors and help grow your vision for you. So for us, it's been hugely instrumental and important. And we always say as a team, it's a complete privilege. Like, we don't take it for granted at all, the fact that we get to reach 30,000 women a week. And we continually pray for them and just really want to honour them in all that we do. And that as a team just really spurs us on that, any difference we can make in women's lives, that is such a privilege.
Yeah.
Amazing. You obviously have, you're very in touch with what's going on in your community. So, and following on from that, I have two questions. One, practically, are there any particular, you mentioned CRM, any particular tracking tools that you have in place that your community manager uses? And then secondly, thinking about your community, what kind of challenges are you currently seeing people or your community facing?
So I'll maybe answer the second question. So when I say that we've defined our audience, we know that a lot of the women who engage with Magnify are clearly very ambitious. And I know ambition, particularly in Christian circles, can have bad connotations, but I'm about ambition all day long because I think it means being purposeful with what you do. So I think a lot of our audience, some of the challenges have maybe been that they have a lot of big ideas, but COVID has clearly restrained them. But what's been amazing, particularly with the last edition, we featured 13 women from the community who all do different things. Some are health workers, some became mums in the middle of the pandemic, some had to pivot their businesses. I think the challenges that we've seen have actually spurred us on in so many ways, because the community are seeing how other women are navigating COVID, but actually still being able to thrive in the midst of this pandemic. In terms of tools, obviously things like MailChimp, with Instagram in particular, we're always looking at our dashboard. And I think just any platform that you have, whether it's Squarespace or WordPress, there's always going to be analytics in the back end. I'm no specialist, but I at least can look at the graphs and the tables and our KPIs. So yeah, I think it's important, even if you're tiny or one person, just to make sure that as much as possible you can look at your analytics, because also there's ways that you can pivot rather than thinking that you failed. It might just be that if you look at your analytics, there's just a little thing that you need to change. So a small example, when COVID started, we were doing Instagram lives and we noticed that we were doing them at 1 p.m. and the engagement wasn't like as high as we would have expected given our number of followers. We then looked at the analytics to see that 45% of our Instagram audience are based in the US, which is amazing because that's kind of very much part of the big picture. So then it's like, if the US makes up the biggest percentage of your audience, it will be 7 a.m. or earlier for some people. So therefore, it makes no sense to be doing Instagram lives at that time. So those were just little changes that when you look at your data, it can just inform your decisions better.
Mm-hmm. Love that. I'm a big fan of data reflecting and remembering that data is, at the end of the day, it's human behavior. It's how we can quantify human behavior, but there's still people at the other end of that data. Thank you for sharing that. That's really useful.
Hey, Ruth, thinking about starting a business during a pandemic. I mean, you're clearly someone who's brimming with energy and ideas, and it's fantastic. But it's not just ideas. You put a lot of this stuff into action and reality. And even just in the last few months, you've launched something new. Want to tell us about that and how it came about?
So Brand Houses, because I wasn't full enough, I decided to launch something else. And over the years, I've just always had people asking questions about how have you built Magnify? How have you also mentally kept going in the midst of building such a niche brand? Also organizations who maybe want to reach younger audiences or more diverse audiences. And then I felt actually, I don't have that much time endlessly to spend having free conversations for hours on end. So I actually wanted to turn it into a business, and just kind of use my expertise to serve both individuals and organizations. So the signature course that I've launched, which is mainly for founders, is how to turn your side hustle into a brand. And it's a 6-week course taking people through some of the core elements, but also having one-to-one hourly coaching sessions, which I'm really excited to start. And then obviously with organizations, doing consulting with them as well, which is something I've previously done, but wanted to kind of formalize that. So that for me is just a real kind of passion that I've realized I have outside of Magnify. So starting politics, I never would have thought that I'd be running a creative brand. But I think in the last 13 years, next Saturday, I essentially am self-taught, but I've learned so many lessons. And I think looking back, I'm so grateful that there were so many challenges, but that Magnify has made such an impact because it has enabled me to discover a new passion.
Yeah, that's good. As I said earlier, Ruth, there'll be people who have been maybe thinking about ideas or got ideas and just maybe not sure how to get going with it. I just wondered, what message would you give someone listening in on this now or later on who has an idea to start something, but maybe hasn't yet taken that first step?
So 2 things. I always love the Martin Luther King Jr. quote that says, faith is taking the first step, even when you can't see the full staircase. And I came across it in the early years of Magnify. And I think that's what I love about being a founder, is no one arrives at the journey of being a founder knowing absolutely everything about their business or their industry. And so from the beginning, just see it as a great journey that you're going to learn so many things. And also, I think, because I started when I was 19, it never started out to be an organization. It was just to have one event. I think sometimes as founders, we can put so much pressure on ourselves because, if we're going to start a candle brand or whatever, we can maybe look at a company like Jo Malone. And from the beginning, we're already putting pressure on ourselves, not knowing that those brands have taken 20 or 30 years to get to that stage. And then the second thing I would say is YouTube and Google will be your best friend. So compared to like previous generations, we can learn so much, like literally on any topic that you want to do. Like when it came to courses, I spent hours, going on courses myself, but also watching YouTube, listening to podcasts, reading books, listening to Audible. There's just so many resources at our fingertips that's a huge part of being a founder, is being committed to learning, because particularly in the early years, you can't outsource to having teams that are specialized in every different thing. But it's a huge privilege, I see, actually, to be able to learn so many different things to help you grow in your business.
Amazing. I think we're seeing a nice or a good thing coming out of the pandemic, that people are starting to maybe dream new dreams or have the space to discover new passions and things like that, people are considering starting new businesses. I mean, are there any areas that you think that we're going to start seeing significant growth or innovation, or anything that you'd like to see come out of this time?
Obviously, if you're in tech or anything online, this is your time. And what's amazing is, for me, even seeing things like health, the way that is being digitized is amazing, because we actually just all see that it makes life easier in so many different ways. So I think definitely anything to do within the health sphere, like we've all seen that health is absolutely paramount. Health or technology or online, or like goods, all these delivery services that now, even before, I never thought that. I love cooking, so I never thought I'd be interested in like HelloFresh and all these different companies. But actually, you just see, when life is so full, these things just make life easier. So I think anything that makes life easier for people who, I think we've all realized we don't want to go back to the frantic nature. Obviously, we will hope that COVID finishes soon, but I don't think running around like headless chickens is something that anybody would like to go back to. So anything where you're adding value in a way where you're tangibly making people's lives easier and giving them back more time, I think will be great. I would love to see the church innovate, because I think this season has shown everyone that obviously we all look forward to going back to church in person, but so many churches have seen their attendance massively skyrocket. Or maybe you've had friends that you've been trying to invite and they haven't been able to attend, but actually, if it's just to watch on YouTube, that is fairly easy and straightforward to do. So I would love to see the church as a whole really use this time and the lessons that we've learned to use technology to be able to reach more people.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned kind of all the free resources or online resources that you use, like Audible, Google, YouTube, and kind of making the use of those type of things. If anyone is kind of listening in or watching the playback today who kind of feels like they have an idea but they don't feel like they know enough, or their network's not big enough, or they don't have the right people in their sphere, do you have any advice of how they might start building a network for themselves?
I would always say, like, there's so many events nowadays that are like for founders or business owners, like just being proactive. Like, I'm an introvert, so naturally my desire isn't to go to events. So physical events are something that I do not miss in any capacity since COVID. But particularly in the early years when I was either trying to meet people or learn, like going to events, there are so many free ones online as well. Like, even a lot of webinars will then have like breakout sessions afterwards. You never know like who you're going to come across. And I think just interacting in an authentic way. So there's nothing worse online than when people do like sub for sub, or where you just comment because you want somebody to, but actually building authentic relationships online and offline, and taking a genuine interest in other businesses, but also looking to collaborate in a way that's mutually beneficial. And that's a huge way to be able to grow your network as a starting founder.
Fab. And as a starting founder yourself, going through this, huge journey that you've been on, we're seeing that lots of people are struggling with different mental health issues or with different challenges. And I'm seeing pop up in quite a few conversations I've had recently about imposter syndrome, about people doubting themselves or maybe doubting their ideas. Is this something that you've ever dealt with in your journey?
Definitely, but I think I'm very grateful to be Nigerian, because there's this phrase that parents always use. They mainly use it when you get like an A rather than like an A star at school. But when you say like, oh, my friend got an A star, then your parents would be like, yeah, but they don't have two heads, so like the same is possible for you. So I think growing up with that mentality, my parents, in a gracious way, always just kind of encouraged me that anyone that you admire, they didn't arrive at that point immediately. Like, it's been a journey. And I think the thing that's also helped is I played a lot of sport when I was younger, and Serena Williams is like my absolute hero, as is like Michael Jordan, and people who really are like the absolute top of their field. But you notice that they clearly were not born like that, and it's taken years of practice, of diligence. Like, the hour and a half that we see of Serena on centre court, she's spent years preparing for that hour and a half. And the reason she's able to perform at that level for the hour and a half is because she spent time practicing. So when it comes to imposter syndrome, obviously there are people that are further ahead of us, who might even be the same age as us, but I try to focus on what can I actually do and how can I develop myself. And then also, I think it's important to be inspired by people, but to be mindful of how much you're consuming what other people are doing. And social media is great for many reasons, but even myself, I've had to regulate a lot of my although it seems like I'm on the platform all the time because I schedule my posts, I'm not actually on the platform all the time, because I find that, particularly when it came to starting the course, I'd be looking at people who are like, their turnover is 10 million a year and they've got 50 people in the team, and they're on all these, they've got a podcast, they're doing YouTube every week, they're showing up on lives, and then you see that those people have got teams of 50 people because they've been doing it for 10 years. And so while it's great to be inspired and understand what else is out there in your sphere, I think imposter syndrome really develops when you spend too much time consuming what other people are doing and then comparing yourself to them, because ultimately there are 7 billion people in the world. For any founder, there is ample people for us to reach, and it might be that your audience ends up being very different to what's in your locality or who you intended, but it will still serve people and still give you enough traction to make what you're doing sustainable. So yeah, it's something in my own life I've had to see to be very mindful of, but I have to remember that diligence and practice and hard work is not a secret ingredient. It is just part of an ingredient of anyone that is successful.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I love that story, or the Serena Williams piece about, for that hour and a half, you see her on centre court, she's probably done 1,000 hours practicing, and I think that's important to remember. as a leader of a team, of a brand, of a couple of businesses now, what's kind of your leadership philosophy, or do you have any kind of key things that you stick to as a leader?
So I realised that firstly, I lead the best team, and I say that all the time to the ladies, that I feel so honoured to be building this vision with them. What gives me, honestly, the greatest joy is seeing our team thrive and seeing our team step up. So, for instance, there was one lady who joined us like 3 years ago. She was in university at the time, quite shy, but just clearly such a gifted writer. And seeing the way now she's our deputy editor, she co-hosts the podcast, like she's doing Instagram lives. She's getting to interview all these, I don't do any of the interviews now. She's getting to interview all these inspiring people. And she said to me, she was like, I'm just so grateful to get to learn from you. And I think that I don't like to micromanage. That isn't my style. I like to work with people who are very capable and very ambitious to be as best as they possibly can be with their gifts. But actually, when you then have the right people, I just want to see them soar. We had another lady who recently joined the team, and she's a little bit older than me. And she was saying, you're really releasing. And I actually didn't even think of that, because I was like, how else? I mean, it just must not be fun to be in a team where you're constantly being like, you can't do anything. Like, I want to see you develop your ideas. And I said to the team on Monday, don't let things be bottlenecked by needing me to sign off. We're a team. We will make mistakes. If you do something and it's slightly off brand, but by now everybody should know what we're doing. But if it needs to be tweaked, don't let that hold you back. Actually feel freedom and feel confidence, because you're part of this team and you've been recruited because I believe in you and I believe in your ability. I know that you have value to add. So to me, that's what makes leading a team so fun. I definitely have made a lot of mistakes over the last 13 years, but I've realized that just for me, the way I'm wired as a person, I love working with people who are committed to excellence. I'm not necessarily the type of manager that can lead people who don't really care about what they're doing. It doesn't fit that well with my personality. And so I think as a leader as well, it's really important to be self-aware. And I realize that I'm probably like to be someone who leads more through motivation and inspiration and cheering you on. I'm not a manager. So hopefully as we expand, we will have a managing director, because managing is not part of my skill set. But obviously as a starting founder, you learn to do different things. But one of the greatest joys for me of this whole vision, talk less of the impact with other women, is just seeing women in the team find their place, get to live out their dreams through the vision of Magnify.
It's fascinating, Ruth. Really, really is, just getting an insight behind the scenes on how you do what you do. We're coming now to a time of Q&A, and there's already a couple of questions coming in. But if you have been listening today and you'd like to just post a question for Ruth, feel free to post it in the comments while we have Ruth with us, and we'd love to just spend a bit of time on that. But there's a couple of questions come in already, Ruth, and one is about mentorship and thinking about, there's a question about asking whether you have mentors at this time or have had mentors. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I go on about my mentors like they're the best thing since sliced bread. They truly are. So it's weird. Even when I was younger at school, like when I'd go to my friends' houses, this is from when I was like 8 years old, I would end up chatting to their parents for like an hour and a half, and they'd be like, why are you chatting to my mum? She's so boring. And I was like, you could, like, your mum is amazing. What are you doing that you haven't been talking to your mum, or you're watching cartoons instead? So just from a young age, I've always loved being around adults. I don't really know why. It's just something that I enjoy. I think I've just always thought that if I was 15 and I didn't know something, if I ask my friend who's 15, they probably don't know either. So that's just a waste of both of our time. Whereas if I ask someone who's 25, they're more likely to know. So it was something that just ingrained in me. I love, like, my parents, I literally speak to them like twice a day, to the point where they're like, please, can you leave us alone? Like, we've got other stuff to do. So I've always loved speaking to adults and just gaining wisdom. But mentorship was something probably from 19 when I started Magnify, where even in church, I'd come across people who were successful in business, or they were successful leaders. And I'd just say, like, can I just grab coffee with you for half an hour. Actually, if some of them were too busy, I would just ask them, like, can I email you a couple of questions? And I think there are two types of mentors. There are people who actively mentor you, and then people who mentor you from afar. So I have incredible active mentors in my life who have accomplished a lot, but the key theme for me anyway, what I've seen helps, is people of faith. So their faith grounds them. So I don't want to be mentored by someone who's just successful at work, but actually at home, they're like an awful parent or an awful spouse. I have mentors who I'm very blessed and grateful that who they are and the essence in their character flows through every single part of their life. And obviously there are people who mentor you a bit more in certain areas. So some more in work, some more in marriage, some in different areas. But mentorship is something that I just could not have done without. And then there are people that mentor me from afar. So definitely, like, Oprah mentors me from afar. Serena Williams, even though she doesn't know me, she mentors me from afar. I spend so much time watching documentaries and reading about people and just trying to take lessons from them. And there are sometimes lessons that you learn, right, I shouldn't. But I always say reading Steve Jobs's biography after the Bible was the most life-changing book for me. And it sounds weird because obviously there are so many stories of, like, you know, he probably wasn't the greatest dad according to his children, different things. But what you saw is, like, that single-minded passion. You could not create a company like Apple just being like, oh, well, I'm interested in like 55 other things, and like, if this doesn't work out, that's fine. So obviously I took the fact that life has to be in balance, but I think reading about people who have created things that genuinely have impact past their lifetime has also been a key way that I've learned. So they're mentors from afar, even if I don't know them.
Good. That's a great answer to the question. Okay, so there's a couple of questions here from someone, Hannah. This is the first part. She says, how do you trust your gut and stay focused on a dream? So I guess you've answered a little bit, but just tell us a bit how you do it.
So I think calling and conviction is such an important thing. So I can't even remember the exact message, but when I was 17, that was the first time I heard Christine Kane preach. And she just spoke about conviction. I'd literally never seen a woman like this, at least not in the church. She was just like this fireball of energy and passion. And it just dawned on me that, like, conviction is so important. So I always say, even the people who mentor me or from afar, if I sat down with Oprah today and she told me, I want you to come and work for me and, like, stop doing Magnify because there's no vision or future in Magnify, even Oprah, who I admire, there's nothing that she could tell me to know that I shouldn't be doing this in this season of my life. So I think conviction is so important, to have a conviction about what you're doing, because there will be challenges. Like, there were challenges this morning. I'm sure that there'll be challenges right after this call. That is just part and parcel. There will be setbacks. There's so much rejection involved in being a founder, particularly when you're doing something that's niche and not just like a standard thing that everybody can understand. But when you have conviction, it just keeps you grounded and keeps you focused in the midst of the challenges.
That's great. And then the second part of this question is how to be ambitious as a Christian when your community aren't or don't encourage it. Any insights into that?
Not only through the Bible, but just people that I know or that we can see. I spend so much time reading about people. And I think that's a huge way. If the people in your immediate circle, in your community, they don't believe in ambition or they don't encourage you, just reading about people who have been successful. And when I say successful, I don't mean by financial standards. I mean making impact in whatever they have been called to do, or using their gifts to the best of their ability. I think that's what we're so blessed in today's world, is to be able to read about people from different parts of the world that we may never meet, but just reading stories of how they have been purposeful and ambitious in what they do. I don't know if that's a good answer, because I totally accept as well. I feel very grateful that, one, my parents have been incredibly supportive. I'm a huge daddy's girl, but my dad, even when I was rubbish at things, would be like, yes, let's like go for it. Like, let's keep going. Even singing that I can't sing, but just give it a try. You tried that. So I know that through my parents, and also my school was incredibly ambitious. We were basically just encouraged to be, just literally think that you could do anything that you put your mind to. There are obviously massive drawbacks to that, but I will be honest and say that I understand that I am coming from a bit of a bias because of that. But I think it's important, even if those in our immediate circle do not value ambition, that there's so many resources out there and so many people that we can read about who can inspire us from a distance.
Mm. It's wonderful. That's the last question we've had come in. So, Ruth, wow, what a treat to have you with us today. We're so grateful to you. Thank you for giving us some time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
How can people connect with you? Sort of your primary place where people find you?
So magnifycollective.com is our website, and Magnify's Instagram is @Magnify Collective, and my Instagram is @Ruth Y Afolabi.
And yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in for this.
Great, lovely to meet you and chat with you today, Ruth.
And you both.
Have a good afternoon, Ruth.
Too.
Yeah, God bless. See
Bye.
you soon.